this should be information that underlines what we need to do to move this country forward. Well, hello, everybody. It's David Lease, your proud host of Leaders on the Frontier, the live edition, and a warm welcome to all of you on July the 16th, 2026, the year of our Lord. It is tremendous, the comments and participation we get from you, the audience. So we so much appreciate your thoughtful comments. Another excellent presentation from Leaders on the Frontier. Thumbs up for this one. That's from Thomas Jefferson. I'm wondering if that's really Thomas Jefferson, but who knows? It's a great comment. Thank you. Thank you for this important information I've shared as we need more Canadians to be aware. That's from Heidi Walton. And I believe Catherine did it again. I altered my last minute plans to enjoy her words of wisdom. Well worth the time. Great topics, very informative. Thanks again, Pennsylvania watching. And this is from Carol Wallace. And that was about an episode with the great Catherine Swift as we talked about investing in Canada, doing more business in this country. That's part of what we're talking about today. And clearly, it was an animated discussion. We've got a lot of comments, so we really appreciate them. That feedback is very important. And quite frankly, it gives me hope for this country that people are paying attention, that you're trying to become more aware of not only the facts, but also the tactics and strategies that can move this country forward and the public policy solutions that go with it. So today, we are talking about a big topic, namely the North. Canada is talking about a lot about the Arctic these days. We want to talk today about why the sovereignty and development of the North matters, both economically, but what does it mean to be a nation that's sovereign? So we want to understand what sovereignty means because there's a lot of talk about it, but what does it mean in practice? We want to talk about the big opportunities for all Canadians, including First Nations, as we talk about an interesting concept around utility corridors, energy corridors that could really make shortcuts to trade and opportunity. So we're going to talk about that and the associated solutions and next steps. But this is a time for action. There's been a lot of talk about these things. What about the action that goes with it as we try to renew and get this economy moving? So thank you very much for your comment. Healing Sun says, please give a thumbs up for this channel's good work. Thank you so much for that gracious comment. We know that your thumbs up make a difference to the algorithms. I'm not, a lot of people continue to try to figure out the big question of the social media world, and this is one of them. So give it a thumbs up and promote it and share it if you care about these topics. So without further ado, we'll dive into some of the headlines, and then we'll get to our topic at hand with the A-team on our panel. And Meta is building its first Canadian data center northeast of Edmonton. It's a big project, some $13 billion at hand. What do you think about that? If you use anything related to, technology these days and AI, you are using these centers. So should they be in our country? What do you think? Manitoba has said no to hyperscale AI data centers south of Winnipeg. So it's interesting. What's the debate? What are the issues there? So stay tuned on that question. Also, Alberta, Ottawa, and different oil producers have agreed to advance the so-called Pathways Carbon Capture Project. This is a very expensive project that would take place as one of the conditions of so-called exporting of Canadian energy to the world market. And this would, quote, decarbonize that oil. Does that make it possible then to meet the price requirements? Does that help the business case or eviscerate it? That's the question here. And that's in the Globe and Mail. Also, an interesting story from Blacklock's Reporter, one of our favorite sources based on original documents. Some 25 diplomats were fired, 11 resigned, and Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand's department last year undertook this action, and neither the fired diplomat nor the foreign state actors were identified. I think this is a very important story to keep your eyes on, as that will continue to progress, no less. And then in other news, Manitobans are on the hook for some $40 million in unpaid medical bills racked up by non-Canadians. And that was according to the Winnipeg Free Press. So, what's the significance of this story as so many non Canadians use our medical system? This is just the tip of the iceberg. As we know, we can probably safely say that some several $billion are going to non Canadians. Does this make sense that your taxpayers are going to people that don't pay into our tax system? All right. And then we have also authorities have charged dozens in transnational organized crime probe, and that continues to unfold. This has been led by the FBI. A number of these actors are across North America, including in Canada. They've been involved with thousands of criminal activities and shakedowns of businesses. This has really devastated a lot of people, including a number of murders involved and the trafficking of everything you can imagine, including drugs. So stay tuned on that story as that unfolds. Okay, so getting to the topic at hand, we know there's a lot of talk about the Arctic, the North. Why is this important? We're going to examine the issues regarding the Arctic and what are the opportunities not only to strengthen our sovereignty, but also looking at the economic opportunities, including utility corridors. There's a fascinating project called Nistanen, which we will dive into, and that's a Cree word for together. What an appropriate word that has powerful meaning here. We are in it together as Canadians. So I want to welcome the A-team to join us. And I have Colonel David Redmond. You've heard him many times as a senior fellow at Frontier. Welcome, David Redmond.
Thank you very much for having me, David.
And of course, Robert Falcon-Ouellette, he's been on the program many times, a familiar face, and Robert is a past MP, a member of Parliament, as well as a professor at the University of Ottawa. He's also done a lot of past work on papers related to defense, finance, and of course, the Arctic. So a warm welcome to you, Robert.
Hey, Tansei, hello. Glad to be here, David.
Great to see you. And of course, Robin Lohr, and he is a former executive in the oil and gas industry. He's been around the world undertaking all kinds of projects, and he is quite an investor in all kinds of opportunities. And we're so delighted that you could join us as a leader today, Robin.
I'm pleased to be here.
All right. So we've got the A-team here to talk about the Arctic. We're going to break this down a little bit. And I want to be able to start off with a question with you, Colonel David Redmond. And that has to do with the Arctic. And it's interesting. We did a straw poll here, and I want to share this with the good audience here. Is Canada losing control of the Arctic? 92% yes, no, 8%. So that's interesting. Are they onto something here? So I want to ask our panel a basic question. In 2026, why does the sovereignty and the development of Canada's North matters? I want to start with you, Colonel Redmond.
So, David, I think Canada needs to step back and develop a vision for its own country. We need to look at all 6 national interests that define our country and see how they interlock. And Canada's Arctic is definitely part of the mosaic that makes up our huge country with 3 oceans that we can connect. And we've always known throughout history that those who control the oceans control trade. But I come back to the basic premise. Out of the 6 national interests, 2 that are always directly linked are national security and economic prosperity and growth. And it goes all the way back time and again in history. In my career, working with Paul Cellucci, the American ambassador to Canada after September 11th, the U.S. constantly said, security trumps trade. And we're hearing exactly the same words today, but this goes back and back. It goes through Democratic administrations. Obama said the same thing. So when we look at Canada and we look at our Arctic, it has to be part of a 25 long look to the future vision that links all 6 national interests, because without it, Canada fragments and it breaks down into small groups, not just provinces and territories, but they end up pitted against each other. So we need a vision for our whole country, and we need to decide what role does the Arctic play in that complete vision of our country.
Okay, so that's quite an answer. It sounds like a keystone question to building our nation, not only our national security, but also our trade. Thank you, Dave. And we'll come back to that in a moment, more detail. Robert, what do you say to that question? Why in 2026 does the North matter here?
Well, I'm sure a lot of Canadians actually have never been up into the Arctic, David. I'm not sure how many have had the opportunity here. I've been up a couple of times myself, but I've been rather lucky. But when Canadians think about Canada, they're often sitting here in southern Ontario, or they're in Manitoba, in southern British Columbia. And we forget that we have this huge country that we've inherited through historical reasons. We've gotten the Arctic. We had explorers like Sir Robert Falcon Scott and Shackleton and others, Rasmussen and Franklin, that have left some vestiges. And we have a large Indigenous population up there, but we don't actually participate very much with the economy. And I want to leave you with a few stats. The GDP up in the three Northern Territories is $11.6 billion. But
Wow.
think about Prince Edward Island. That's $10 billion of GDP right there. If you look at Newfoundland, $42 billion, one of some of the smaller provinces. Now, if you get to Alberta, it's over $600 billion. To Ontario, almost $1.1 trillion. So when we start thinking about the actual size of the Arctic, Canadians and the Canadian government have not developed it. And I would contend, actually, this has been a strategic blunder on the part of many governments for the past century. We see other countries like Russia who have developed their Arctic. A large percentage of their GDP comes from the Arctic, as well as the United States. Alaska is a major player in the U.S. economy. They might seem far away, one of the other, and they might not always be considered in everything, but nonetheless, they do have major military bases. They have importance in the economic sphere, and Canada just has not done enough to go out and ensure that we continue to hold on to it, because we've inherited it, but we haven't really done very much with it. And we might be one of those people that, we only start crying once we see the coffin coming into the room. We don't believe it until something's happened. So I hope this debate can spur a little bit more discussion about and push the Canadian government and others with a vision to actually start doing more and having a greater vision for our nation.
Well, that's a brilliant summary, Robert. And I like the reference you made that, golly, in retrospect, that was a strategic blunder. We've taken almost this incredible area and set of opportunities for granted. And so well said, Robert. Robin, how do you respond to the question in 2026? Why should we be looking at the North again?
Well, it's ours as Canadians, and we have a track record of not taking care of ourselves. Our economy is underperforming, and we've got all these resources that we could be doing something with to help our people and our economy, and we're not paying attention. And there's just some fabulous examples. And I'll just run a statistic to follow up with Robert's comment. So if you took the natural gas prices in Europe earlier this week and the Canadian gas prices in Europe, and if we were able to get those prices for all the gas that we exported to the US, after operating costs, we would have made $20.5 billion in this month.
Oh my gosh. In this month?
This month.
Okay, so this is a big headline. I want to make sure the audience doesn't miss this. You're saying that because we have one primary customer, namely the United States, for our oil and gas, we don't quite get the full price that we could if we had many, many customers like Europe and Asia and all the rest. So we're leaving money on the table. And you're saying 20 billion plus.
And we're trying to figure out how to fund our military operations. So Colonel Redmond, would 20 billion help with that every month?
It would let us start to rebuilding the Canadian Armed Forces in a definitive way.
Yeah.
Oh my. So there's one example. Another example is in North America, we actually manufacture essentially zero stainless steel. Now,
You got to be kidding. I wasn't fully aware of that.
We recycle a bunch. 2/3 of the stainless steel in the world is produced in mainland China. Essentially none here. we have all those resources in northern Manitoba specifically, but certainly northern Canada, that we could have with Manitoba Hydro, the most efficient stainless steel business in the world.
Incredible. Well, we're talking about a lot of exciting vision here and opportunity. If you're more interested in Robin's point about energy differentials and how much money Canadians, and shame on us for leaving on the table, you can look at Frontier's website and our what we call our energy calculator. It's meant to be for educating, education purposes. But there it is, clicking away on the website, tallying up the kind of money we forfeit. We're underselling Canadian oil and gas to the United States. Hardly any Canadians are aware of that. So if you can share that with your friends, you can impress them with how much you are aware of these things. But what a powerful set of answers to this important question. So I want to turn to you, Colonel Redmond. Let's talk about the Arctic. You have played a key role in Canada's national defense over the years. So, David, help us understand your perspective on Arctic security. And in fact, to put it bluntly, do we know what's going on in the Arctic? Do we even patrol it? Do we know what's going on there?
Absolutely not. When I was first joined the Army in 72, we used to do Arctic sovereignty exercises. And just so you know, I was born in Whitehorse, so I have a little bit of a linkage back to the north.
So you have some cred here.
And have traveled and worked with the military across all three territories. So the challenges that most people don't understand are immense in terms of sovereignty of the North. Just start with the geography and its extent and its mass. And we're not just talking about on the surface, we're talking about in the air, and we're talking on the ice and below the ice. And so, step one is always surveillance. The very first thing you have to do is be able to see the entire piece of terrain, but you have to do it against the known threats. So you have to do a threat assessment, and it has to be an ongoing threat assessment, and then you have to do the surveillance. We can't even do surveillance of our entire Arctic. And by surveillance, I mean detection, recognition, and identification, the three-step process to actually look for activities, whether they're benign or hostile. And so when you can't even do surveillance on the entirety of your landmass, and let's not just talk about the Arctic, all the way down both our coasts and across the rest of Canada, we have a severe shortage of that capability. So you have to define the threat, and then you have to do surveillance to try and identify it. And there's many more pieces, but just to say we can't even do surveillance on the entire Arctic is a statement. North of 60, it's terrible.
Okay. So help us understand then the strategic picture here. Can you outline that? I know you've got some important information here to just help us understand the bigger picture.
So maybe Lorraine, can you put up slide 4? Let's just start there. When I say surveillance, first of all, if you don't have a physical presence, and what we've watched Russia doing is building a physical presence all across their north, but a lot of the times the actual physical presence then needs to be linked together with routine patrolling and interdiction. And then we get into that threat assessment. So what are the actual threats to the north of 60? And let's be serious about it, because one of the things I used to jokingly say when we were doing Arctic sovereignty, we'll meet them at the tree line. Let them come across the frozen expanses, and when they get to the tree line, we'll take whoever's left if we're talking about a land invasion. So really, in the old days, we were talking about bombers coming over. Now we're talking about missiles coming over. But you need a physical presence in your territory if you want to say it's sovereign. And so we need to have established people that live, work, and breathe in the North. And I don't just mean those doing defense. I mean, we need to take all 6 national interests, define them, but we need to do it in a logical, thoughtful method. There's no point in putting critical mineral development in the North if you can get it south of 60, because the costs are immense. They go up proportionally the further north you go. So let's do it in a logical manner, but let's link it all together. And then when you talk about your corridors, You need to build corridors so you can move your defense forces rapidly from side to side. But as well, let's talk about economic prosperity if we're actually going to develop items in the north. But there has to be a reason why you do it there and not south of 60 that's compelling.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've got to be strategic and practical, if you will. So, Robert, I know that you've done a number of analyses involved around the North and defense as a former member of Parliament federally. Help us understand your perspective on how we should look at the issue of Arctic sovereignty. What comes to your
Yeah.
mind?
Well, the parliament, there are politicians at the federal level who are thinking about this. There is some engagement in the Senate and in the House of Commons on some of the standing committees that they do an occasional study. The problem is it seems to get to the government, and I like that suggestion by the colonel there of having a 25-year plan. You actually do need to have a long-term plan and a vision about what you want to be doing in various parts of the country. And this is not like laissez-faire economics in the southern parts of Canada where you just kind of let people figure it out on their own. This is a very difficult region to get to. It's very expensive. Often there's no roads. People don't realize that. The government is trying to build a few more highways to connect different parts, but you have to fly everywhere, or you have to be on a shipping container in certain parts of the month. Certain times of the year. And so it's very, very difficult to start operating businesses, and it takes deep, deep pockets. And the government, if they believe in this area, if they don't want to lose it inadvertently because, they weren't doing anything up there, and apart from a few rangers and a couple operations, Op Nanook, which is one of them from the military, which is an annual exercise, then you actually do need to have a plan about what it is you're going to develop or what you're going to be doing. And I think it comes back to the economy. And, if you haven't really built up that economy, you're going to be trying to defend something that really perhaps you don't even want to defend or even do. Like if the Canadian government says, well, we don't really want to develop the economy, it's not in our interests, but we want to spend more on national defense. Well, I have to ask the question, well, what for? Because they kind of have to go part and parcel together. If you're doing one, you need to be doing the other. You need to be making sure that when you're investing in a port up in the north, that port can be converted over to civilian uses. That when you're building landing strips, that those can be used by civilian aircraft. That there are ways of getting the military up north in those areas. I know it's been mentioned, but maybe bombers or missiles are coming over, but even just operating up north is very, very difficult, and you need a certain level of infrastructure. I was talking to some of my friends. They went up with Op Nanook over the February. It was so cold, they said. They had to double up the heaters in some of the mod tents. A couple people brought out cell phones to videotape a few things. The cell phones conked out after a couple of minutes because it was so cold. They wanted to operate a couple of drones. It was too cold. And they said, well, if we're having difficulty operating up here, probably the Russians will as well, the Chinese. But the issue isn't just that. It is the control of the waterways. And I feel the government, they have invested more money in the Arctic patrol vessels. They've built 6 of them, these new vessels, which is good, but they can't operate in heavy sea ice. And they're not even armed, really. They have a small crew. So it kind of makes you laugh a little bit. If you did happen to see a foreign submarine pop up in a certain area, would you be even able to enforce anything? You can watch it and say, "Oh, I saw it," but then what? So you can't really. It's hard. You need to be able to defend your sovereignty. Otherwise, people just say, "Well, you don't really matter," and that's the issue with Donald Trump. And he's been talking about this with Greenland and Denmark. Oh, the Danes can't defend this territory. They can't defend Greenland. We should take it. And he could say the same thing about the Arctic with us as well. He could say, we should take Nunavut. We should take the Northwest Territories.
No
I've
kidding.
droned on enough, though, David.
No, but this is fascinating because I know that you serve also in the National Reserve, Robert, to your credit. And I find this fascinating is that you're giving us all reality therapy between you, David, and you, Robert, that we talk a lot about sovereignty, elbows up, but we don't really have sovereignty in the far north.
South.
Am I being too blunt about this, David? Is that the brutal reality?
We don't have it in the north. We don't have it in the south. Our country has been completely permeated. All 10 elements that make up national security in the last 11 years have been intentionally, in my opinion, destroyed. And we've had this conversation before.
We have.
But
Yeah.
but the whole point is, we haven't got it in the south, we haven't got it in the north, and until Canada has a 25-year vision linked to all 6 national interests, with economic prosperity and growth being the engine to fuel the other 5, we're not taken seriously as a country. We've been removed from alliances and partnerships in terms of the defense side of sovereignty. And it's time we either took it seriously or realized that we're a country that's about to be fragmented.
Right on. So let's take this matter seriously for many reasons. We know that there are important economic opportunities. We need a strong economy that's foundational for our society. We also know that in the north, there's all kinds of data around poverty, the opportunity to move education achievement forward as well. So there's a lot of opportunity here, and I think this is all interrelated then. So Robin Lohr, you are an incredible business leader who's done all kinds of energy developments around the world. It's interesting. Do you see a lot of opportunity in principle then to develop the economy in the north?
Well, the opportunities are huge. We just collectively get in our own way to keep those opportunities from being developed.
We get in our own way. What do you mean?
Well, we've got, and I'll exaggerate here for a minute to make the point. We give every Canadian a veto, an individual veto on a project. Well, so how do you get that many people to exactly agree on approving the project? Now, that's an exaggeration, but we do need quite a number of approvals from diverse groups with different agendas, and some argue that those agendas are even created by groups outside of Canada. So how do you get a project move forward? We need some leadership and some opening up of this. And there's a bunch of examples. The liquefied natural gas, which I referred to earlier, the first liquefied natural gas facility in Canada was proposed about the same time the US thought of doing it there. They are now the largest exporter of liquefied natural gas, and we have just recently put one on stream. One. And I'll couch that $20 billion a month. That's a real number, given the current prices earlier this week, created by the Straits of Hormuz. But if you don't have the facilities, you don't get to help your allies with those supplies and benefit from it.
Right on. So a key point there, Robin, is we're getting in our own way. Sheridan Forbes, from our audience, says, David, here's the truth. Politicians don't care about Canadian standards of living, the economy, or safety. Taxes, fees, and red tape are high for prosperity in Canada. Let's hope that Sheridan Forbes is wrong as we look to our economy that's shrinking, believe it or not. So we've got to get this economy moving. So I want to just finish off the tail end of David Redman's point about sovereignty then. What should the actions be to move that file forward? And as you think about that, I want to tell you quickly, as an aside, that some 2 years ago, I believe it was in April, I saw a fascinating document that related to the tabling publicly of a navigation map and detailed narrative for shippers moving from ports on the Chinese coast through the Arctic all the way across to the other side. And it was fascinating. So you've got a whole navigation route being mapped out for Chinese shipping, and I believe that's starting to happen. So in my mind, it's kind of, is it one of these situations where if we don't use, or if we're not present, I think that's a key point you're making, if we're not present in the Arctic, then others will gladly move in that vacuum. And that's exactly what's happening. Is that a fair comment, David?
Absolutely. And it applies to our whole country, not just north of 60. Lorraine, if you could do slide 3, just if you don't mind. A task force is something that I've worked on in many cases. When it was time to close Canadian Forces Europe LAR and bring 18,000 Canadians and all our kit home, we formed a task force with a 2-year mission. When we did counterterrorism following September 11th in Alberta, again, a 2-year mission. And you don't finish it, you get that massive kickstart. And so my proposal for anything like, let's just talk about sovereignty in the North, is a 2-year kickstart. And you have to give them specific tasks with deliverables that are measurable. And so the types of things that I've put on this paper here are the types of activities that are the overarching tasks, and then they get broken down into smaller and smaller tasks. But it has to be a dedicated group of individuals who have no other tasks for a 2-year period than to do this. And so it starts with that 25-year vision, which is linked in a white paper that people across Canada are engaged in the discussion and are brought to believe in a long-term view. So you can take that away. Thanks, Lorraine. But the whole point is, if you don't start with a group of people who are specifically tasked across all of the disciplines, and by all the disciplines, I mean across every one of the 6 national interests, economic prosperity being one, unity, national security, governance, rights and freedoms, economic prosperity and growth, and societal well-being, which includes the education system and the healthcare system as part of all of it, you won't be able to develop the meaningful performance objectives with a timeline to try and get somewhere in 25 years with a 2-year kickstart.
Okay, so there you have it. That's encapsulated. We need the A-team on this. We need to bring together that kind of task force to be able to incisively look ahead. As Robert says, we need the vision, the 25-year kind of framework that allows people to not only think through these issues around defense, but also the building of the infrastructure and the opportunities for people like Rob and Laura to lay the money on the table and get the economy moving. So this is very interrelated. So Robert, what do you think about David's summary of an action plan? I know there's a lot packed in there. Is it a yes or no, or maybe? What do you think, Robert?
Well, I think it's a strong yes. Obviously, you'd also have to include people from all levels of government in different areas, as you've mentioned. And you do need people who are in the education field. You have to plan out like what this is going to look like long term, because if you can go in and extract resources, and you can build a road, but then what do the communities look like, and how do you get people to stay, and how do you create an environment that you actually make it so that Canadians want to remain there and they can develop businesses and develop richness or wealth for Canadians, because that's one of the major issues that we know here in Canada. The GDP has been slightly growing because the population has been growing, but per capita for many Canadians, it's been remaining stagnant, meaning that as collectively, you're actually getting poorer over the last decade. And you can blame governments, but the issue is Canadians have had for 30 years, 40 years, an issue with productivity, and we haven't been using these assets of ours to actually develop our economy, so we are richer in the long term. And so I think you do need a plan, and you need people who are actually, that's their only thing that they're doing day in and day out. You can't expect the Prime Minister to be thinking about this day in and day out. Some politicians have a national vision, but oftentimes they get relayed or delayed or onto other things. There's another crisis out in the Strait of Hormuz, or there's a crisis out in Europe or in Asia again. And we forgot about the Arctic, and we haven't thought about it for a year and 2 years. But you need actual people who are thinking about it all the time, each and every day, and planning and getting other people around the table, including business, to get stuff done.
I like the way you think, Robert and David and Robin. We need focus here. Focus, as my mother would say.
Maybe they could take those 25 diplomats that were fired in Blacklocks and put them on that job.
Yeah, no, exactly. But Robin, so I want to turn to you because I know you are a focus leader, and tell us more about the whole idea of energy transportation corridors? Because I know that you've got some maps here to show us, because we're a trading nation the last time I checked. And I mean, I think Canada, as it's been pointed out, is a kind of in a stagnant point in our economic life here. We've got to really move forward on business investment and opportunity. So how do we do the shortcut that's going to advance our nation? And I'm kind of excited about the concept that you're advancing. I know there's a number of ideas of a corridor, but what is a corridor? Can you tell us what you're talking about here?
Well, let me jump in on a couple of things, and I want to refer to Robert and David's comment there. We don't have to have, we need a 25-year plan. We need a long-term plan, but we don't need all those details figured out.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I'm going to call it, I hallucinate about what the country's leaders did 100 years ago, building these things.
Yeah,
Did they have
amazing.
the whole plan figured out, building a rail line up to Churchill? No, they just thought this type of transportation is a good thing. The rest we can evolve along the way. Now, back to your specific question, David. And I'll quote, before I took this on, I spent some time in New York and London talking to finance guys, and
Mm-hmm.
one of the bankers in New York said, "Robin, why are you Canadians letting us do this to you?
Pardon me? What do you mean by that? Doing what?
Why are you letting us profit from your natural resources, selling them to the rest of the world?" And today, this week, natural gas is a glaring example of that. But it's not the only one.
Mm-hmm.
We have and potash. Half of the world's potash is in Western Canada here, primarily in Saskatchewan.
Unbelievable. An essential ingredient to the world's food supply, namely fertilizer. So if no potash, no food supply for the world. So Canada is ground zero for potash.
Absolutely. The other two big suppliers are Belarus and Russia. Those are troubled places to get potash from.
Mm-hmm.
And if we could just for fun, we'll pop up the map on potash, if you could, on routes of potash, because Brazil imports 12 or 15 million tons of potash a year.
Sorry, can you repeat that? How much?
Brazil imports 12 or 15 million tons of potash a year. And Canada, out of Saskatchewan, is a big supplier of that.
Indeed.
So how do we get it there? Well, we rail it through the Rocky Mountains to the Pacific Ocean, and then we go through the Panama Canal, which is troubled these days, to get it to Brazil. And that costs a lot of money. Other ways are railing it to Halifax,
Mm-hmm.
for example. Now, if we could also pop up the slide, which has the ship.
If you could just hold for a sec here. So you're illustrating here on this map the current red line show the current shipping routes to Brazil as an example.
Yeah.
And you're wanting to short circuit that by building basically a trade corridor. It could be like 3 or 4 kilometers wide. And you could ship all kinds of commodities, including potash, right through Hudson's Bay. Is that what you're talking about with that dotted green line?
Absolutely. And most of those facilities already exist. Like the rail line already exists to Churchill. The Port of Churchill has some problems when you're hauling heavy loads and big ships and things like that. It needs help. And there's a group has done some work, and the paper is actually called The Case for Nistanan, on how we need multiple ports in the Hudson's Bay.
Yeah, right.
And this slide actually, I think, is one of theirs. uh, uh, Port Nelson an area around the Nelson River estuary, we think has solid rail access and a port that could be built using the Roberts Bank example at Tsawwassen in Vancouver. Right there, that's the Roberts Bank existing port superimposed on a solid ground location on the Hudson's Bay near the Nelson River. So we think this stuff's all possible, and you could get big ships in there and fully loaded trains.
Wow. So this is an ambitious project to run the corridor right across the west to Hudson's Bay, to, in this case, Port Nelson. This isn't over against the Port of Churchill.
Oh,
We've lost you, David.
Well, I'm going to jump in while David's talking there.
Yeah.
Oh, you're back.
David, are you back?
Yes, I'm back. So what kind of magnitude of project are we talking here, Robin? And then I'll turn to Robert and David's reaction to this. What kind of scale of magnitude? Is this like a $50 million project, or is this several billion dollars?
Well, sadly, all the antes in this game start with 50 million or 100 million or a billion. So none of this stuff is cheap. But again, let's just remember that there are months that on one product, we have allowed the Americans to profit for $20 billion on 1 month.
And that's oil and gas.
That's natural gas specific.
Natural gas specific.
Natural gas specifically.
Wow.
So when people say, well, this is too expensive or this is too big, I go, well, you're not understanding what the issues are. That we lose hundreds of billions of dollars to the Canadian economy because we don't have these things, and these things cost a handful of tens of billions of dollars to develop.
Okay.
What is needed is a port that can handle large ships, and they're going to have to be ice strengthened for a while, and heavily loaded trains. And you need multiple ports, because even the Port of Vancouver gets shut down. So you need multiple ports developed. None of this is rocket science. The Russians operate in tougher conditions than this in their Arctic. It's just a question of getting our collective wills and attitude realistically around what's required for transportation.
Okay, but the workers in the north of Russia do function a lot on vodka. I'm not sure how much we have. But I would like to, jokes aside, I would like to point out, there are the federal government seems to be moving in the right direction on a number of files. They seem to be investing more in the military and more on economic development. And we've been talking a lot about pipelines. I think for me, some of the parts that are being forgotten in this conversation is, there's a lot of great ideas. It takes a vision, but it also takes sitting down with Indigenous groups. And I know that Natkistigan it looks like they have an Indigenous name, so they've likely sat down with Indigenous groups to have these conversations. But a lot of leaders want to go around that type of consultation, like Danielle Smith. She doesn't really want to talk to her First Nations too much. They got a bit of a difficult relationship out there. Doug Ford is also having some difficulties. But if you don't sit down with the First Nations groups, a lot of these projects won't get built because people end up in these camps arguing with each other. And in the Arctic, in some territories, the majority of the population is Indigenous. Like if you go to the Nunavut, it's Indigenous. The Northwest Territories, not all 100%, but there's a very large population who are Indigenous. And you have to have people on side who see the benefits for themselves, who can see themselves in the project, that know that they no matter what happens, that it's not going to destroy the environment, and they will see benefits for their children and grandchildren, and they can still breathe the air. So these are very it can be quite substantial and change people's lives, but you have to make sure that people have everyone is involved and not just a few groups.
Right on.
Well-
So what do you say, Robin? Is there an opportunity to engage First Nations in all of this?
Well, I mean, that's thank you for that setup there, Robert. That is the fundamental of Nistanan. You know, it's a Cree word, means all of us or us two or us together. I don't speak Cree. And it was created at a dinner with the Fox Lake Cree Nation. With really, it was, hey, we think that there could be a functional port site here on solid ground in our traditional area.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get together and look at that. So it wasn't created in Big Co's boardroom. It was created by the First Nations.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's many steps to move that forward.
Right on. Okay, so just to clarify, so First Nations are involved in this concept across the corridor. Is that correct, Robin?
That's correct. We've,
Okay.
you know, and again with, I'll call it the Home Guard Cree or the Swampy Cree group of nations being core to that. But we have, I personally have accompanied some First Nations people to, golly, 60 First Nations across the Northern Prairies.
Unbelievable. 60 First Nations.
Yeah.
Okay. So, David Redmond, what's your response to this kind of concept? Is this a case study of merit to kind of integrate both economic opportunities, but also for really bringing a presence that helps, you know, assert our sovereignty and set up for, you know, like it's iterative, it's a synergy. What do you say?
So I'm going to answer in about three parts. First will be humorous. People forget why Edmonton is where it is. It's because the Hudson's Bay Company, one of the richest companies in the British Empire, sailed sailing ships into Churchill, Manitoba, and built York boats and came all the way up the North Saskatchewan River to pick up furs from Edmonton and take them all the way back to England. So talk about an economic corridor. It's been there for over 350 years.
Oh my gosh.
We are ridiculous if we don't think we can do this when they could do it in 1750 something. All right, and they did it with the full participation, obviously, of the First Nations. So there's my little humorous step one. Step two, the reason I always talk about a vision built on all six national interests. National interest number one is unity. And unity as a people that believe in a future for our country built on all six national interests obviously includes the First Nations, all from the Inuit, the Dene, the River Cree, the Northern Cree, all of the First Nations all across our country, but all of Canadians too. And we have to agree on a vision, which then allows economic corridors. So my third part is rhetoric versus reality. And we've heard the US in the last 6 months use that phrase repeatedly because we have a government that has lots of rhetoric for the past 15 years and no reality. And so we look at, let's use the example of the pipeline to the West Coast and all the rhetoric that's gone on for over a year. And now the reality of what we're seeing is it probably will take decades to build, if we ever build it, because what we've allowed is tariffs. And we talk about Trump and how horrible tariffs are. Well, now British Columbia, for doing nothing, and First Nations along the route for doing nothing, are demanding massive tariffs because we didn't believe in the economic prosperity of our country and working together to achieve it. Everybody just wants a tariff to move oil through a pipeline. So are we going to end up with tariffs stopping products coming from Vancouver going to Ontario because Alberta puts up toll booths? Are we back to what Europe looked like before the EC? We're in a position where rhetoric is great. We're talking about these great projects, and then we're stepping in our own way. And I go back to what Robin said, the Americans are laughing at us, but the people who are laughing at us most are the Chinese. And if we don't understand what's happening in our country with Chinese interference, you want to talk about sovereignty, The whole premise of sovereignty is having the ability to make the laws and to make the decisions for your people, by your people. And yet we're seeing foreign interference every day in our country trying to pit us against each other. So rhetoric versus reality, my final point, I have to keep coming back to. Big talk gets nowhere. Without a task force, without a vision, without Canadians buying into their own future, we'll continue to pit Canadians against each other.
Wow. Well said, David Redman. I love it the way you refer to history. And wow, we can learn from that history as we talk about the Hudson's Bay Company working together with everybody, including First Nations, to make a lot of money and opportunity. Very inspiring. The other thing, Robert, is it's interesting you referenced the whole opportunity to work with First Nations. Is David Redman onto something here?
Of course, First Nations also want to see prosperity. Many of the reserves, which are, traditional places where people have lived for thousands of years, are very far away, and people would like jobs as well. There is some communities that have high employment. They want to participate. They want to have those jobs so they can buy nice things for their family, have a good quality of life, have good housing. So I don't think First Nations are always opposed. Some people believe that. But what they do want to do is participate in the conversation, at least in the beginning, to be able to propose the ideas and see how they can work towards something to make sure that they can build generational wealth as well. And not just a one-time thing where someone comes in, they have a couple of days of construction jobs, and then the company moves on to the next location and they're left with nothing. People also want to be able to build a company, build some long-term wealth so that their grandchildren can benefit and have those opportunities that did not exist before. Because you have to, that's what reconciliation is about. And I think we often talk about that. It's not just about education and ideas, but it's often actually about economic reconciliation.
Right on. No, that's well said, Robert. So I have a very interesting question, and then we'll turn more to kind of the back end of this conversation related to next steps here. And that is, Robin, there's a lot of talk about projects. Is this all about getting a big government check so we can do this project, or what's your vision here? Is this private sector money, or is this just all government funded pipelines? I mean, I looked at the Trans Mountain Pipeline project, and I know they're making a lot of good money here. That's very important, but it was so difficult to get that done that the government ended up taking it over. It's almost farcical. So what are you talking here? Is this private or is this public money?
Well, it's all this stuff is all privately financeable after you get past the question on whether you're going to get cut off at the knees by the government.
Ah, indeed.
And if you look through a number of the big projects that haven't gone forward, you'll find that all those executives got to go find a new job. And so what we've done is we've trained big co-executives that are capitalized with the expertise to move this forward, that if you want to lose your job, just have a big idea like this.
Okay.
So that's the reality. Now, the good news is the Carney government knows that. And an example, so did the Stephenson government. They had, in about exactly 3 years ago, the Stephenson government put a support package together to speed up the Nees to Nan program. They lost the election.
I would like to add just something, David, real quick. Even Sir John A. Macdonald he used the government to actually build the railway across the country. That wasn't just private enterprise by themselves. It was a vision for the country. They knew where they were going. They saw the potential of the West. They wanted to occupy the West. They sat down and negotiated a treaty with First Nations, working with First Nations. And, obviously there wasn't always good, the relationship with First Nations afterwards, but, there was a considerable amount of effort done to actually get the railway done with government support and a lot of government debt. And look where we are today. I live in Manitoba. You're in BC. I'm not sure where everyone else is, but I wouldn't be living here likely if the railway hadn't come through.
Yeah. No.
Well put, Robert. And the government does need to be involved in in kicking this stuff off. I think we all agree on that. That's part of the vision.
Mhm.
I think the last 10 or 15 years we didn't have a government that was capable of doing that.
Mhm.
I think we do now. So let's collectively get our act together and move this stuff
Mhm.
forward. The answer to the question, the capital component of it is privately financeable.
Mhm.
You know,
Okay.
we don't need $50 billion of government money. Now, we need the governments to work with the other groups to get this thing organized
Mhm.
so the private capital will change their perception of the risk profile here.
Okay. So it sounds like government's got a strategic role to help enable it go forward, cut the red tape, let's go, but also enable the opportunities for investors to get on board to this train and make it happen, to continue Robert's historical reference to the railway. We have a lot of opportunity here. It sounds like, gentlemen, we're talking about a nation building opportunity here. Is that what we're talking about, David?
Yes, and it's got to be reality, not rhetoric. And so when I come back around the circle, the reason I use a 25-year vision, if you're going to see corporations put hundreds of billions of dollars into an investment, it's going to take a generation in order to recoup that, hand over hand over hand over hand.
Mhm.
And so they need to know they have a government with stability that isn't going to change its direction every 4 years and then veto what they have just spent $1 billion starting. So we need to have a vision that people have bought into, and that each government then, in order, tries to achieve that vision and shows Canadians that they're the best government to get to the vision, which is renewed every 5 years. So your 25 years keep sliding. But what you don't do is instability. And so if you want massive private sector investment, they have to do it in a stable environment. And so rhetoric has to turn into reality in terms of legislation, a clear vision, and meaningful performance objectives that then get met.
Would you buy David's prospectus that he just outlined, that government stability and good, sensible policy here matters, Robin, and then you, Robert?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I just want to inject a bit of, so the challenge is there's huge additional GDP available. We have a problem with who's taking the risk on the infrastructure project and who benefits from that. So we've got some work to do on that. And an example of this, a related example is the reason Manitoba doesn't want a big data center is they don't have the reliable power. There's half a dozen hydro dams on the books, but those hydro dams historically have had cost overruns. So there's a political problem if you're a government-owned company like Manitoba Hydro in taking that on again. So we need to broaden that perspective, bring in the Europeans who would be the beneficiaries of liquefied natural gas, et cetera, and combine those efforts.
Okay. Any comments, Robert?
Well, I think the issue comes back down to not just to having a vision for a nation, but actually it comes back, I think, a little bit to the more minute detail is the spending priorities and establishing those spending priorities over a very long period of time. Like Canada just finished off 6 Arctic patrol vessels in a very short period of time, very impressive. But maybe they should have spaced that out over a number of years, because they're going to have this huge glut of very new Arctic patrol vessels, 6. And then in 30 years, they're going to be broken down and not working. And then we're not going to have any. We're going to be having these huge conversations about trying to replace them. And so you have to make sure that you have this long-term planning where you're replacing things on a constant basis. The MCDVs, the Maritime Coastal Defense Vessels, they were built almost 35 years ago for the Navy, the Naval Reserves. And today, they're essentially all out of operation. And we're using a couple of YAGs, which is a very a training vessel. I don't know if people know what that is, but it's not very, you can't do a whole lot with it. You can sail up and down a little bit. You can put some sailors on there for a little bit, but it's not really what we need. But we should have had a long-term plan. Every 3 years. We're going to have a new vessel come online all the time. And then you're building up towards a replacement protocol where you're just procuring the material and there's constant jobs, and it's not this one huge glut and then it's the starvation period, a boom and a bust. But the governments don't seem to be willing to do that very often. But I will say Stephen Harper did make Arctic sovereignty a bit of a priority. Justin Trudeau, it fell way down by the wayside a little bit, but it was still talked about. But Mark Carney, he seems to want to do something with it a little bit more. They seem to be wanting to advance, and maybe that's because of the United States a little bit getting on our trying to get on the horse with us here, but we'll find out. David.
All right. No, well said. So we've got a lot of opportunity here, and we know it's about action ultimately. So let's turn, Madam Producer, to our slide here. I want to talk a little bit about action, one of which is the Frontier Center is holding a conference coming up in Winnipeg on September 14 and 15 on this very topic, reclaiming the North, strategic utility corridors for sovereignty and economic development, moving from vision to action. So this is, I think, will be an exciting opportunity to bring this all together. We've got some featured participants, including Lieutenant General Michel Maisonneuve, the former Chief of Staff of the Canadian Army, retired, and he'll be speaking about this, as well as Ron Evans, former Chief of Norway House and Cree Nation. And you can register online, and we'd love to have people join us. Registrations are flying out the door fast, and we know that it's going to be a big event because this is, I think, a game changer for building our nation. What are the policy, not just opportunities, but what does this mean in terms of action as we bring together jobs and opportunities? So is this a winner or not? We want to have that kind of debate and discussion. So as we look to wrap up our discussion, it sounds like we've got to strengthen defense. We've got to look at opening development and get informed. What are actions that strike you as very important to keep in mind? And I'm going to start with you, Robert, then David, and then Robin.
I'm going to throw a new idea out there, and it's this whole of government approach, not just people in defense or industry, but even, for instance, housing. Imagine if you wanted to move up north and you decided to move into a very small Inuit community in order to open up a business. You had a business idea or something you were thinking about. Where do you live?
Good question.
Could you rent a house? Like, is there any housing? We know that there's a substantial lack of housing, but that's a basic thing. And the government often underfunds the development of housing up in the Northwest Territories, Nunavut. There's people living couch surfing quite a bit. There is some homelessness in some communities up north as well. And that's a huge problem. And if you want to develop the economy, people, if they have an idea, newcomers, let's say from India or from Africa or from Europe, who move to Canada and say, I want to live up north, I want to experience that. Where are they going to live? How are they going to get there? And we have to make that something that is actually a reality for people, or even tourists. Could you actually rent a hotel room in some of these communities? Like, I would love to go up north, but I'm not going to go because I'm not certain I could bring my family if there's anywhere for me to stay.
Yeah, me too. I echo your comment, Robert. David?
I think if we don't step back and decide what we want Canada to be, every one of the small issues has no home. And until we do the threat analysis to our country, then decide on a vision for our future based on all 6 national interests, we will continue to make spur of the moment decisions. And I'll use the submarine purchase. I mean, it's all topical, and we're talking about defense of the North, and I'm sure many people are saying, well, the submarines are part of our Northern strategy. So let me spin you back only a few years, like 3. Why 12 submarines? Why the number 12? Ask yourself, because no one can justify it. I can. It was Justin Trudeau, desperate to show that he was going to reach 2% of GDP. And would 5 get him there? No. Would 7? No. But okay, if I get 12, I can say we've reached 2%. That was the logic behind the number 12. And we're going to buy a submarine that can't go for 6 months and sit on the bottom of the ocean under the Arctic ice. So we're buying again, just like the Arctic patrol vessels that can't sustain in heavy ice. We're buying equipment for a military requirement. But let's go to the bigger, the unity, the national security, the governance, the rights and freedoms, the economic prosperity and growth, and societal well-being that includes housing. Let's talk about the whole. Otherwise, we're just going to throw money at disjoint ideas to make short-term gains for political gain, not for the good of all Canadians. We need a vision that we can attach all the decisions to, and no decision is permitted then if it doesn't get you on the path. And so I don't want to just talk about military. I have a much broader background than military. But the military decisions we're making are ridiculous when we think we can train civil servants in 5 days to be effective members of the Canadian Forces. They're political decisions to reach ridiculous political objectives.
Okay, so I like the theme, David, you've emphasized as being clear about our national interests vis-a-vis a clear vision of where we're going so that we know where we're headed. I mean, if you don't have that kind of roadmap, then you will make all kinds of piecemeal
Then industry
decisions.
will go to the U.S.
Yeah. Okay. Well said. Robin, what's your comment here about this opportunity?
Well, I'm just going to add my attempt at humor on that. You know, we sent some stuff into the Trudeau government about 5 years ago, and I think their view on infrastructure was a playground near a voter, not a national plan. So I applaud your comments, David. We need to actually move on some of this stuff, and I'll give you an example of what part of our group is the Wapusk LNG project, and they have actually on their way to acquiring some land on the Hudson's Bay to move this forward in conjunction with some of the Home Guard Cree, and they're planning to have 2,000 or 4,000 acres of land available for the military in that
Interesting.
process.
Wow.
So it's that integration of ideas that we need to move forward. I'm not smart enough to figure out Canada's 25-year plan, but I do agree we need one.
Okay. Well, this has been an incredible conversation about nation building. That's really what we've been talking about. The vision, the importance of getting there, not only for the sake of our economy, but for the sake of Canadians, their prosperity, their opportunities to live out the Canadian dream. That's why we're here as a nation, to build our country and move it forward. And so I'm really grateful that we could have this conversation. Robin Lohr, Robert Falcon-Ouellette, as well as Colonel David Redmond. It's been a delight to have you here today to discuss this.
Okay. Well, thank you for allowing me to participate.
Absolutely.
It's halfway. Thanks very much.
Thank you. And I want to then turn to our audience and say thank you for joining us for this conversation. There's been lots of comments, and keep them coming, and we welcome them. And I also want to ensure that you join us next week on the same time. Be sure to check us out on our social media channels as well as on Merit TV Canada from coast to coast. And of course, be sure to join us next week at the same time. Check out our website on the Frontier Center for Public Policy. You can learn more about these issues, including that energy differential calculator that Robin Lohr referred to. But we care about this country, and we care about moving it forward. And thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next week.
Here at Frontier, we don't receive any government funding. We are nonpartisan, and we work for you. Find out more and support this important work by visiting fcpp.org today.